declare the meeting open. The date for the record is 28th of April and it is exactly 9:30. Councillors, there's two parts to the agenda. As we're aware, we all agreed that we also have the Māori training. The idea was to really ensure that we get a good and full representation on this important matter. So we will continue through there and have some lunch as well. I think we've allowed an hour and a half for that. The agenda's well set out and I think it's pretty straightforward. My first task is to ask and call for apologies. Unfortunately, Councillor Quayle's wife Elizabeth has COVID, so Barry's online and will participate in full, as he always does. Are there any other further apologies, Dave?
Mr Chair, I'm aware that Councillor Hodge has an apology for today.
She's an EB, it's an EB chairs meeting that the government have called, so it is of importance. So I move that the apologies be received. Councillor Hodge, it's seconded by Councillor Virco. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Confirmation of the agenda item that of Councillor Hodge has withdrawn that. Is that correct?
Yes, item 7.1, the notice of motion has been withdrawn from today's agenda.
Any other comments on the agenda?
Yes, one, Chair. It's actually an agenda matter. On page 43, the title is wrong. It's got Ruakara Charitable Trust and it should have Risk and Assurance Committee on page 43.
Well noted, and good morning, Barry, and hope Elizabeth makes a speedy recovery. And
thank you, Chair.
Councillor Quayle moves the confirmation of the agenda. It's seconded by Councillor Husband. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Those
against, carried. Are there any disclosures of interest that are not noted on the register? If there are none, there does not need a mover or a seconder. I now move into the confirmation of the council minutes, and the first one, that being the meeting of 31st of March. Moved by Councillor Sori. Councillor Kneebone, happy to second that they're true and accurate. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Now we come to the standing committee meetings, and the first up is that of Councillor Nicol, and it's Climate Action Committee, page 15 on your hard copy. We're in your hands, Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair. Most people here were at the meeting. We had items on the water availability and security, effects on the Waikato region. We had Thames Coromandel District Council Shoreline management plans profiled, and we had the proposed approach to local climate change risk assessments, as well as a really good paper by Blair Dickey on renewable energy opportunities, and an update from Karen Bennett on emission reduction dashboard update. So there were no Section B recommendations. So just if there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise.
Councillor Litchfield.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 19, item 8, nurseries providing plants as key contributors for dealing with climate change. They require water supply security, and it was suggested that council should act on this issue. I was just wanting to know what sort of action or outcome there will be as a result of that item.
Sorry, I'm just struggling to locate it.
Page 19.
Page 19.
Item 8.
Item 8. I don't see it.
At the top of the page, I think it's point G.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, sorry, it is too. Oh, there you go. Glasses required. Thanks, Chris.
Chair Nicol, are you happy to have a crack at this, and then I'll put it to the CEO?
Yeah, sure. So from my recollections, that was raised by yourself, Councillor Chwak, around the fact that it's hard in a warming climate for natives to even germinate to a lesser degree as time goes on. And so water security and water supply and storage is a key item that is a KPI of the CEOs. So I understand that's where it will go, but I'll hand over to the CEO to comment on the detail.
Right, Mr. CEO, you got the question?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Litchfield. Unaware of the specific issue being addressed in the water security matter. It's the water security KPI is around looking at the climate change impacts and where water might fall in the region and what that means for the future, so we can develop a strategy. I'm just wondering if Karen Bennett's online and might be able to talk to this, whether you've picked it up, and how we would act on this issue to specific nurseries throughout the region.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and good morning, councillors. Just reiterating Councillor Nichols' comments, this was a matter identified by Councillor Lichtwark, and I think it was really just an endorsement of the conversation and to extend the conversation from urban water needs and the need for water security in urban areas and for farming communities. It was just an observation that an action to mitigate climate change is ensuring shade, ensuring trees, ensuring Indigenous biodiversity, and just a recognition that there was an opportunity to have water, best use of water to provide for all uses across our community.
Through the chair, it says require water supply security. That's not really what I read in that as. I totally support the concept that nurseries should have security when it comes to water supply, as farm animals do require, but so do humans. Look, you know, there is an example when that cyclone came through and we had 4 days with no power. No electricity to drive pumps. There was only one alternative, was to use a fire pump and a local stream to water or irrigate, which was possibly illegal. But it emphasised the fact that we need some sort of security or some emergency ability to keep plants alive, you know, and when you've got a stock 100,000 plants sitting on weed mat that are shriveling in the sun, yeah, I think this is a really good idea, and I support the wording of this as in we need security, not just you know, a view taken into account. Thank you.
If it's all right with the chair, I can respond to that. I see that, as you identify, it's a risk for everyone to not have enough water for various uses. So how about that's something we can definitely highlight, in particular when we're working on the other item in this agenda of the Climate Action Committee of the local climate change risk assessments. So that a risk that you've identified gets highlighted in there, which will apply to pretty much every sector anyway. And then what will fall out of that will be towards the solution that you're indicating. Is that all right?
Thank you. Yeah,
cool.
That's great.
I'll keep that in mind when we work on that in the near future.
Councillor Husband?
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that topic. Why, everyone would have read the newspaper this week about the consents for dams, for water storage. Why does it seem that, it seems like we're out of step with government, this council. We're not encouraging water storage. We appear to not be encouraging water storage on the surface of it, with massive consent fees and you know, and really not facilitating any help with people doing water storage. So what are you going to do in that space? Encouraging this council to do water storage.
Yeah, so it's been raised with me by others, constituents as well, who may be urban but also have farming interests, that there's this hurdle, and so I wasn't surprised to see that news article. And obviously we need to enable people to make their livelihoods work, make transitions if they want to make transitions to be more resilient, let's say even if they want to change land use, for example. The conversation I had specifically with someone was around changing from livestock farming to cropping, for example, and that requiring irrigation and so forth. So it's something that, and I just want to highlight that Councillor Vercoe's raised this a number of times as well. So it's very much on my radar, and I think that for my mandate on this piece, or the committee's mandate, is to have a look at what we just talked about with the local climate risk assessment, using that risk of the fact that it might be too difficult for people and looking at what we can do about it. But the exact specifics of that, I don't know what they are yet.
Yeah, so like going from livestock farming to cropping
Just an example.
is not going to happen, because plan change one won't allow that when it comes in. You know, like it'll be a non-compliant consent to get. But I'm meaning just what we've got here and now. Like, I might rabbit on, but I'm not a complete dipstick. I know there's something happening with the climate, right? But more so, we need that water. And yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. Just for what we're doing now. Forget about if you're changing or anything like that. Just the business as usual. We need that water. So it'd be really good if we keep advocating for storage.
Keep that high up on the list of risks that we need to work on, definitely. Yeah.
I just repeat, I don't think with the climate change, certainly there won't be less water, but it's more intensive. And with that, it needs to be harnessed. And I think we'd be foolhardy unless we kind of recognise the prosperity it brings to our nation. So water is a source of life. And I believe that it's important that councils don't kind of end up to be roadblocks when it comes to actually water retention, so we can use it in drier periods of the year. That's the feedback I get. It just seems to be the hoops that regional councils put applicators into people that are applying is horrendous and expensive.
If it's helpful, the National Climate Change Risk Assessment did identify the water issue and the availability of water issue as the top issue. So you can imagine it'll be very near the top, if not the top issue in the regional risk assessment as well. Not wanting to preempt that, but it's right up there. So your concerns are all very valid.
I guess the upsetting thing for me, Jen, is, the upsetting thing for me is he has banged on about water storage for 9 years. For 9 years, not just the last 2 years or 3 years, 9 years. CEO will attest to that. It's 9 years, and we're still here. You know what I mean? We're still in the same position. We've just treated water for 9 years on this topic. So I think it'd be good to see you push it forward. Yeah, thank you.
Point made, Councillor Husband. Councillor, if you like to bang on, seriously, it's a concern to you. 9 years. Talk about practically, Councillor Burko, and then Councillor
Chris
White.
McLeay hadn't come in as chief executive, it would be another 9 years before I could get anything done. But having finally got convincing the regional council that there is a pond of water in there that does not take a drop into or a drop out of for month after month after month unless it rains, therefore I should be able to use it. That argument was accepted, but then government have come in and said the maximum area that you can irrigate without a resource consent that will take you $100,000 in a few years is 10 hectares. So therefore I am limited to a maximum irrigation of 10 hectares, which is on a chicory crop. You're not allowed to irrigate pasture, so that ain't going to work. The reality, and we tried it this year, the reality of actually getting water onto 10 hectares of chicory is very difficult. Do you put in a permanent system? And of course you can't afford a permanent system if you're only doing 10 hectares. That'll cost you $250,000, which blows it out of the water. So the cheapest way is to use your travelling irrigator, but then that won't get a lot on. And yes, it was an interesting exercise, and yes, we can irrigate 10 hectares of chicory, but we haven't sort of worked it out yet how to actually do it. So I'm hopeful that somebody will give some better advice.
Coming to Councillor White, I just want to ask this question. I know it's not, but I want to ask the question. Is that quantum that you can take, is that because from one dam, or what I'm getting at, if you divide your farm into 4 or 5 different ownerships, does that give you 50 hectares?
Yeah, if you had to subdivide your farm into 10 lots, you could then have 100 hectares. I'm thinking of doing that too.
We're on the same page. You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to beat Councillor Virco. Councillor,
Yeah, just following on from what everybody else has said, and I've been around for long enough to know that Councillor Virco has been talking about this for a long time. I guess my question is just more about process. The fact that this council did say that water storage was a priority for us. We had quite a lot of discussion about it. But I'm not aware of a lot of work having been done to this point. So just a question for our Chief Executive as to why, when we say we want something to be a priority, does it take so long for us to get to a full examination of exactly what's possible?
Chris, would you like to respond in a positive way? And yeah,
Oh, sorry.
but you'll be next up. Just Chris, I mean, we did raise it, probably with Vaughan too, as was our priority. You know, we have these little kind of nice little meetings of what we hope to achieve over the next 3 years. And this council now in the dying phases of the 3 years. And perhaps some of us are concerned we haven't made enough progress. I'm sorry if I dropped you in it, but I'd like you to respond.
No, I think it's a really interesting discussion. And look, we have started the water security work because of major infrastructure for water supply is going to be put into the Waikato, and it's not just in the Waikato and Waipa catchments. We've got to talk about the Hauraki catchments as well, because it looks like that's where some of the projections are. It's going to get drier. A lot of thought has got to be put into where it would get put in and how it's get put in. And that is the work that's occurring right now, which, you know, I've got a KPI to try and have to develop a strategy for water security for the future, so we can then have those discussions. It's going to take a lot of discussion with central government, and I think the Climate Action Committee had MPI talking about this very issue at the most recent meeting. And it's going to take a lot of joined up thinking with the likes of the hydro system and how that works with water that comes in from the Whanganui River. And it gets managed all the way down the system, because there's a lot of potential for storage. I know that some of our hydrologists also talk about the potential for groundwater, and you know, there's huge potential there. I don't think it's just a matter of putting it in. The other matter that's been referred to, I think, is that some of the high costs of putting in large storage systems. Of course, some of these come through the Building Act, of which we don't create the rules over. But if they are large-scale systems, it's got to follow the Building Act type processes to get through, and that affects some smaller players, if you like. But if you're watching with interest what's happening in the Waimea catchment down in Tasman at the moment, where you know they've had quite a lot of significant cost blowouts. They'll get there eventually, but I think that they've got to do this in the face of making sure they put in the infrastructure for that changing climate in the future, as Councillor Husband referred to. I'm sorry if it's too slow, but I think that you've got to do the planning up front to make sure you get it right for the long term. But it's well and truly on our sites, and I think that that northeastern part of the Waikato is certainly appears to be a key area coming through from the climate modelling.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Sorry. Jen, I think, yeah, because water is number one, especially to me. Right? I can't survive, my business can't survive without water, obviously. So, you know, for 9 years I've been saying things like hosing down with effluent. As the dairy companies won't allow us to do that. So region needs to work closer with the dairy companies about being able to use green water to hose your yard. Instead of using pristine spring water or sucking water out of a bore, I could be recycling that water 3, 4, 5 times out of my pond. So, and that's what I actually said that first time 9 years ago, and we're still here. And irrigation, you know, you don't have to drive far. Just drive over to Hairoa, and you can see those irrigators going day in, day out of the Waihau. They could have big ponds that they can, you know, for encourage water storage, that they're not having to do that, put so much impact onto the Waihau, you know, onto our waterways. So yeah, just as long, I know you've got it and thing, but it's a really important topic going forward, and the stress that's out there at the moment in the farming sector, in all sectors, with this dry, is not cool. So water it's just highlighted that we need to get smarter about our water. We can't wait another 9 years to do this. Yeah.
If I may, Chair. No, I hear you. I mean, my own property's only had a few days of rain in the last 6 months, so I'm seeing it myself. We've all seen how COVID exacerbated some issues that we've already had. Issues like inequality, for example, just showed it so much more and made it worse, right? So climate change is similar to COVID in the sense that it highlights to us and exacerbates issues that we've been talking about for a long time that need addressing. So if Climate Action Committee and these things in this council can put more pressure on, then that's generally what will happen. And that's why you see it coming up in the agenda as well. So,
and through you, Mr. Chair, the critical thing is the storage is the first part of the problem, right? It's all good to get storage. Then you've got to take the water out of the storage. And that's where we need to make sure that we're not crippling people with consents and compliance costs that they can't take the water out. They can have the dam, but they can't take the water out because the consent cost will be just too onerous, the consenting process. So, yeah, that's the key bit for our council.
Points well made. Are you talking about farm dams, Councillor?
Any dam. Yeah, any dams.
Good morning, Councillor Degg. Councillor Degg,
Yes,
you've got the floor.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Just a comment around that whole water storage and sort of cropping issue. There's a whole new technology called agrovoltaics, which basically means you can grow crops under solar panels. And one of the features I've seen relating to that is you can have water collection channels below the solar panels, which collects the water and can then feed into the crops that are growing, in and under the panel. So there are gaps in the panels to allow sufficient sunlight. So, there are some new exciting possibilities in that area. Just on another issue on the agenda, there's an item relating to the Thames Coromandel Shoreline Management Plan that we would have a discussion about that at strategy and policy at the May meeting. And I see from the agenda for that meeting next week that that's not on there. I'm just wondering, if it's not in May, when we'll have that discussion. Thanks.
Questions best directed to you, Councillor Story.
It's not in the May agenda. I'm not sure what the timing is proposed on that from Director May. Perhaps, I think Tracy is online. Perhaps she might.
Chris, I'll ask
Yes.
Director May. Hi, good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors. Yes, Councillor Tim, thank you for highlighting that. I was going to speak to it at Strategy and Policy next week. As a result of the conversation at the Climate Action Committee, we did undertake to have a workshop with councillors, invite TCDC along so that we could form up a council position and input into the Shoreline Management Plan process. We've had confirmation from Thames Coromandel District Council that they will take comments up until the end of May. Unfortunately, COVID and people not available from TCDC to host that workshop, we weren't able to get the workshop in April. We are confirming a date with Task today to have that workshop in May for councillors, all councillors, and we will have TCDC staff present. Following that, we will take either a position of council through the submission subcommittee or council at the end of May or Strategy policy in early June. So we just wanted to make sure that TCDC was speaking to the Shoreline Management Plan at a workshop, and then that would be followed up with a formal position of this council.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Any further questions or comments or input? Would you like to, Chairperson Nicol, move that the agenda true and accurate?
Happy to
Noting that it's Section A. Councillor Husband was at the meeting. Would you like to second it? I formally put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Next item is Councillor Quayle, Barry. It's page 22, the minutes of the Contracts Committee of the 11th of March.
That's right. Thanks, Chair. There's two sets of minutes to be considered here. Both of them are in the public open section, and we're just leading into closed committee after that. So it's very procedural. So I just put forward both this set of minutes and the one a little later as well. on the same basis. So I move that.
Councillor McPherson, happy to second. Questions, comments? There are none. I'll formally put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. And Councillor Story, it's Stratton Poll, and it's page 25, and we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you see on page 25 and the following, the minutes from the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on the 15th of March. The Section A items are for noting, and the submissions that were discussed were lodged as a result of that meeting. There is one Section B item that needs to be endorsed by council today, and that is with regards to the recommendations on the Waikato Regional Pest Management Plan 2022 to 2032. So just in terms of context on this, the hearings panel presented their recommendations on the Regional Pest Management Plan 2022-2032 to the March meeting. This included that the hearings panel was satisfied that the RPMP review had gone through a robust process. Issues raised through the submissions and hearings process had been robustly considered and addressed by staff, and the proposed Regional Pest Management Plan meets the requirements of the Biosecurity Act and is consistent with any other legislation. The hearings panel was also dissolved, having met its agreed terms of reference, and the Strategy and Policy Committee endorsed to Council that the Waikato Regional Pest Management Plan 2022-2032 be adopted under Section 75 of the Biosecurity Act 1993. As a result of some of the discussion that happened at Strategy and Policy on the 15th of March, there were some additional tasks that staff followed up on, and that included providing key messages to assist councillors with regards to the tail end of the review process, and that was provided via email. The completion of the RPMP forward was made available yesterday through Democracy Services, so that included the chair's statement at the front of that report, and we have ensured that the completed Waikato Biosecurity Strategy will be presented to the Strategy and Policy Committee before being finalized. Should be noted that that is non-statutory and doesn't need to be endorsed for the RPMP to be adopted. So I'm working with Patrick to get this onto the June Strategy and Policy meeting. So the next required formal step is for council to adopt the Regional Pest Management Plan 2022-2032 under Section 75 of the Biosecurity Act 1993. I therefore recommend to council that the Waikato Regional Pest Management Plan be adopted.
Okay, moved by Councillor, I won't formally put it, but it's moved by Councillor Story, seconded by Councillor Kneebone. Questions, Stu?
And I also seconding it.
Right. Councillor Schwark?
Yeah, I know it's a foregone now, but when it comes to Canadian geese and the problems those things are causing to the marine environment and farming in our area isn't going to be addressed through our pest management plan, and it is really very weak when it comes to the control of Canadian geese, and they're only going to, that problem's only going to be exacerbated in not doing anything, and eventually it's going to cost us a hang of a lot more to deal with the issue. So I just had to voice my concerns as relayed to me by our rural sector and by me personally as to understanding how much damage they're doing to the seagrass beds, both in Whangaroa, Aotea and Kawhia, and they are causing huge amounts of damage. Thank you.
I'm getting Councillor, the chairperson of that committee to respond, but you know, if you ever want to read a book on great courage and skill, is when Scully hit those Canadian geese with that 737 aircraft when he was taking off, I think it was Newark Airport in New York, and managed to land that aircraft without any loss of life on the Hudson River. That was Canadian geese. Andrew, you got the floor.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Litchwark, I note your concern, and we gave that particular subject a lot of airtime at the hearings. We had significant submissions made to us. I think in the end of the day, Fred, where we got to is we live in a time where resources are constrained. We considered the suggestions that were made, and we formed a different view, but rest assured we gave it quite a lot of thought. It wasn't just something that someone stood up and spoke and we moved on to the next subject. As a hearings panel, we challenged the executive after the hearing to make sure that we had looked under every stone to make sure that, because we knew how passionate you were particularly about the subject. Chair, if I could also add one other point. I'd like to ask the Chair of Strategy and Policy how we're going to deal with the fact that we've got a plan signed off for a strategy that's not signed off, and the optics on that aren't particularly flash. I understand why we're in the situation we're in, but if the Chair of Strategy and Policy could address that. It's a matter I know that she's applied her mind to. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've asked Patrick to join us and he'll talk us through what the plan is.
Governor Patrick, welcome to the meeting. If we could have a response to that, gone through the hearings, when they're going to be operative, what's the problems?
Yeah, Morena, and thank you. So the strategy doesn't necessarily need to be, I guess, formally signed off for us to adopt the RPMP. It's with the designers. It's pretty much ready to go. So if we can get it on to the website as a final draft, it provides a good context. And I think that'll be really important for the next steps in the RPMP process, which will be us telling all the submitters and the public that this process has gone through, and that triggers a 15-day appeal period. So they'll need to see that strategy for the context, and for exactly the reason that Councillor Litchwark has brought up is where does Canadian geese fit? If there are no rules in the RPMP, how are we going to play in that space, and that are articulated in that plan?
So are you saying that you will be putting up the document in a draft form on the website, noted as draft, etc.? Because if that's the case, I'm very happy. Thank you very much.
Before I come to Councillor Husband, did you want to just respond to what Andrew's raised?
As I understand it in my discussions with Director May and with Patrick, is that we will put up the draft on the website alongside this, so that there is that contextual understanding for any potential submitters with regard to the RPMP.
That's it. Thanks for the response. Councillor Husband? Oh, no, Councillor White.
Yeah, just I didn't receive anything extra in my email in response to the RPMP with the changes that were made. I know that there were some comments made about the bits that were missing to be added. Just wondered in terms of our process. I know it's in there as in the agenda referring to an attachment, but do we normally actually include it in the agenda if we're going to endorse it or endorse something, so that we can actually look at it and refer to it specifically? So I was wondering about this as a process question. Thanks.
Sure. It was, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. The draft was sent out yesterday, a link to the draft, and in that you'll see the forward, the chair's forward. That.
But we were just sent it yesterday. Yesterday. That I really don't think that
it was the bulk of that was provided earlier. The only difference that came out yesterday was that forward, which
so that's
is
the only
half
change.
a page.
I still think we should receive those things earlier than that. I really do. It's not okay to receive it the day before, thanks. And I really think it should be in the agenda. I mean, if other people are looking at our agendas to actually, you know, keep track of the things that we do, I really think that it should be there, and that they should have, you know, the 7 days that we all have to look at something. I really don't think that that's okay.
Okay, points well made, Councillor White. Councillor Husband?
I've got this little bucket, this little 9-year bucket, and in that little 9-year bucket is water storage and koi carp. And I'm very disappointed that koi carp is not included in this one. You know, we've had money off Eugenie Sage, and if I hear it's DOC's responsibility, I'm going to puke, because it's happening in this region. It is destroying our waterways, and we know DOC are doing nothing. And Patrick's going to say it's DOC's responsibility, and they've got the major millions of dollars that needs to be gone into this thing, or some partnership, but the reality is they're getting worse and worse and worse. So at what point does Region step in and say, actually, enough? And I challenge anyone who was on that panel, did they go to the Lower Waikato and talk to the local people and see the fish, actually see them seething in their waterways? Because, and the undermined banks that have gone under for 2 to 3 metres on our catchment infrastructure. So did the board go and have a look at that? Because that's the important stuff. So, and I don't want to hear an excuse why we didn't do it. I just want to say I'm disappointed in it. And I'm not blaming anyone on the panel, because I know it's bigger than the panel. But I think as a regional council, it is upsetting that we just seem to be fobbing this off, a couple $100,000. That's piddling on a house fire. So, eh? No, I'm quite. I mean, I know everything that you guys know. I know that it's bigger than thing, but somehow we've got to. I just want to make the point that somehow this has to come in under region at some stage. DOC are not going to take responsibility for it. It's a great big scab that no one wants to peel off. Unless, of course, there's new information and DOC are going to completely pay to rid the carp out of our waterways in the next 5 years. Brilliant. But in the meantime, they're actually destroying our infrastructure. Greg's infrastructure and our council infrastructure is being destroyed, who ratepayers pay for. So at some stage, the ratepayers are going to turn around and put the blame back on council. Who knows, they might hire legal teams to take council to court if they're not supplying service standards because of these fish. So that's all I'm saying. And I know it's bigger than you guys, and it's not directed at any one of you, but it's a concern that this council needs to take serious. Like water storage, like stuff, we need to actually not wait here for another 9 years and then still be talking about koi carp. We need to actually action it. And to see iwi are doing a fantastic job in Lake Waikare, Tāwara Nikau and the local hapu are doing great things. Why is it them in the papers and not us? You know, why? Where are we? Yeah, and sure, we might have given them a little bit of funding, and I'm very close to Tāwara, so I know what we're doing. Next to nothing. So sure we might be doing a little bit here and there, but we need to get more actively involved in this space. These fish are killing our waterways. Forget about dairy farming. Forget about things. Eugenie Sage was the one who gave me the figure that 1,000 of these fish, 1,000 of these fish is equivalent to having 150 cow dairy farm in the middle of the lake in E. coli levels. That is the stats from government, from Eugenie Sage's mouth. Alan Livingston will attest to that. So that's how bad these fish are for the waterways. And if you looked at the photos that Malcolm sent around year after year after year after year, when the floods go out and his fish are a metre deep over all his paddocks, there's more than 1,000 out there. And that's just in Lake Waikare. When our flood infrastructure, when Kenny and the boys are out down the Waihau, things are getting jammed up, grates are getting jammed up with these things. There's thousands of them. in the Waihao. You know, there's billions of these fish, and somebody at some stage has to do something. So, yeah, that's all I'm saying. It's more of a blur and not a need for a response, because I know the constraints that are on everyone on the panel. It's not a blame on anyone on the panel. But I'm just hoping that someone on the panel, and I'm sure Pamela being constituent councillor out there, and same as the Canadian geese, exactly the same issue. These are regional problems that need to be dealt with regionally. But yeah, thank you.
I'm coming to you, Councillor McPherson. The question, like, we put up 250,000 K. I understand that, but it's better than zero. We do Waikiri at the weekend too, and man, the housing development in that area is very impressive. The lake is not impressive. It's actually got a kind of orangey, colour on the western side, and quite disturbing to say the least. So, Mr. CEO, you paid the big money. What are you doing about it? You're doing experimental with kind of fertiliser. Sir Michael Friedlander, we had that meeting. Fred was there as well. He's put personal money up as well. What are you doing about it?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So when council chose to put some money into it through the long-term plan, there was a lot of discussion about how it would get spent there and where council's resources in the space are being used elsewhere. So we're following that plan and having put the money up, and there's a plan for how that's going to try and get leverage of turning now $250,000 into a lot more. But that's only with, as Councillor Husband says, the money that we've put in to date. There's no other plan at the moment in line with how we've indicated we're going to be spending our resources in council to divert other monies into it. I guess part of it was waiting the outcome of the strategy which has come out, and if the issue is going to be a strategic priority going forward, I'll be looking forward to raising that with the new council and to where that sits in the priorities.
Chicken shit or chicken feed in some people's eyes. It's not as far as this, because I thought we might be able to leverage from it. I felt there was, at the papers at that time, because of the enormity of it, there was kind of a bit of pushback from staff. That might have been ill-founded, my kind of feeling on it. But is it too big a problem? Is that the problem that we're having? Does no one really want to, as Councillor Husband say, to actually kind of make a start on this waterways of this country? And I'll come to you.
I'll just talk through your speaker, Mr. Chairman. It is a massive problem. It is, as Councillor Husband indicated, it's going to take a multi-institutional response to it. No institution on itself will be able to deal with it. We have trialled things over the years. It is something that, when we're looking at the current resources, financial resources we've got and where we spend it, we will have to have a look at the priorities because, amongst other things, we're going into a high inflationary environment and we can't keep doing more on our current level of resources. We've got to have a look at the resourcing we've got and where our priorities are. I'm sure that in our current operational teams and in the strategic approach that's been taken here, there would have been a lot of consideration given to what are the priorities in the region and what can we focus on most. That doesn't diminish what Councillor Husband has said. It is a massive problem for water quality, and we can try and fix a whole lot of other issues, but until some headway's made here, we can't fix some fundamental issues of some of our waterways, particularly with respect to sediment. Points made, and as I say, I think that's going to be a discussion going forward for our resources that we've got. What are the strategic priorities and how will we implement them?
I think a very good response. Ask Councillor Storey, if you turn your light off, I will come to you.
If I can just respond to Councillor Husband.
And then Councillor McPherson and Councillor
thank you for raising that issue, Councillor Husband. you know that as the constituent councillor in that constituency, I raised it on a number of occasions. I ensured that the voice was heard and that the concerns were heard. I think that, you know, given your statement that the former Minister of Conservation clearly acknowledged the negative impact, the widespread negative impact, it's unfortunate that the ministry didn't, along with that statement, contribute the funding and the assistance to address the issue, because it is bigger than Waikato Regional Council. And so it's unfortunate that when central government acknowledges the issue, they don't also contribute to an answer. So it was certainly taken into consideration. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if the chair of the hearings panel wanted to make any
Yes, who's the next speaker? Andrew?
Yeah, no, in relation to Councillor Husband's blur or blah, whatever it was he said, I heard you, and I think you're absolutely right. I don't want to add much more to what Pamela's just said, but I do want to give Councillor Husband some assurance that if I look at the issue Stu and I have faced in Aotearoa with Lake Ngaroto, and we've had a huge death rate of fish in that lake, and what's happening is citizen science, in other words, a man who sails that lake most days of his life, reports to me the drastic kill-off of fish, followed by an amazing return of clarity in that lake. And as a result of that, we've managed to get a young engineering, mechanical engineering graduate interested in the problem. He's doing a PhD as part of his engineering qualification. He's raised in the Waipa. His PhD's been supervised by Waikato University. And guess what? It's on electrofishing. He's built an algorithm that allows him to sail over in an unmanned vessel that can work 24/7, that has an algorithm that'll identify koi down to 4 meters, will stun them, they'll float to the surface, they're then harvested by a vessel that's already been built at Waikato University. And guess who's supporting him with the, what would you call it, epidemiology and the zoology, is none other but our Brains Trust upstairs. So as I said at the very start of this triennium, this is going to be an example of we don't need more money, we just need more brains, because I'm firmly of the view that that university and our scientists upstairs working together will come to a solution. I'm hoping that this council will support this young man with his PhD program, and we'll be able to run a test case in Ngaroto and maybe the lake that you mentioned too, Stu. So it's not that this council's not doing anything, and it's not that this, well, I'm certainly not subscribing to say to you that it's Doc's problem. It is all of our problems, and I think behind the scenes there's actually quite a lot of work going on. We've invested with the gentleman that you mentioned before, Tawara Nikau, but I think also our scientists are applying their minds to this and not saying, no, Doc's not giving us any money, so we're not going to do any work on it. And so I'm reasonably confident, and it's going to take a long while, but I'm confident that technology and science is going to hold an answer for us, Stu.
Can I, Mr. Chair, can I give a quick question to that? Is that all right,
Yep.
Stu? Stu, do you mind if I have your light?
I think...
just a question on that topic that Andrew was talking to me about then.
Was it specifically in regard to what Councillor McPherson just said?
Yeah.
Keep it nice and sharp.
Yep, it's, Andrew, that's great, but it's fractious. And by that I mean, if you could bring it all together, and Tawara doesn't know a thing about what you've just said, not one thing. So iwi know nothing about what you've just said. So when It's great to have all these things, and we've had them over the 9 years. We've had lots of different things, but we'll get to a point where one group will say, "Oh no, you can't do that." No. And it's not necessarily iwi. It could be this council, could be anyone else. But you're going to get to a point where if we're not all working together, so.
Yep, points are made. Councillor Ebone, you've been patient.
I was just letting people know that next week at ICM we've got a report coming from Michelle Archer on where we're at in terms of spending some of that money on koi. It's focused on infrastructure and opportunities to try and manage the fish that way, which of course is just one option, but just want to let everyone know that if they're interested, ICM next week. We should be there anyways.
Right. Thanks for that. Andrew, you another crack? Right. Fred?
Yeah, just following on from Councillor McPherson and supporting the community science initiative. And I was party to one of those community initiatives with Chair Remington. I think that was last triennium where we went to Tikawhara, and the suggestion there was that community-led project that wasn't supported, and was really disappointed because a lot of our community well-beings and a lot of our documents point towards supporting community initiatives, and they're not.
And guess what? They've eradicated the carp.
And that community initiative, there really is expertise within these communities, whether it be farming communities, and that happened to have been a farming community working with a commercial eel fisher, and they wanted to load these areas back with eels, to put a prohibition on taking eels, and eels will eventually eat the alvars, the smaller, not alvars, they will eat the small carp to extinction. And there are very much ways of eradicating these things, but nobody is taking a lead role. And again, I think it's poor governance. I think this council should have stepped up to this and actually put more resources into supporting community initiatives, as Councillor McPherson has pointed out with his electric fishing, and supported some of these other initiatives that are out there that we're constantly turning down. Thank you.
Last speaker is for the third time, but it's very important.
Yeah, it is an important topic. I mean, it's probably the most electable topic Pamela and Fred have to stand on. Koi carp is a savage issue out there, so, and myself and you in our area. But that's the bit I'm saying, Andrew, right there. Fred's articulated it nicely. These community-run things are getting no support from this regional council. Sorry, they're not. Sir Michael Friedlander, put in his own money to do that trial. We haven't even checked in to see how it's going. We haven't even checked in to see how it's going. Guess what? They're gone out of that waterway. Guess what? It's succeeded. But we haven't even checked in. Pamela knows. I know. But this council hasn't even checked in. And they've known about it. Don't say you haven't known about it, because I've said it 1,000 times about Sir Michael Friedlander's project and the eels eating the babies and baby carp and all that. That's exactly, and that's going to happen to your mate. And the next council or the next council that's exactly what I'm trying to say. We need to get in behind and support, whether it's that guy, these people that are out there. I check in regularly with Murray Twining and all those boys. I just said, "Is our council touch base with you?" No one even knows that we've eradicated the carp out of here. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a small waterway, by the way. It's not Lake Waikato, but it's it's a step. So yeah, that's all.
Thanks very much for your contribution. And look, the topic is an important one, and I think what we've had today, it's a full council meeting. It's not even a standing committee. It's not a workshop, but I think it's of such importance. The chair's let this drift on more than he would normally do. I formally put the motion. It's moved by Councillor Story, seconded by Councillor Kneebone, that the report be received. Section A for noting, Section B for adoption. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carry. Barry, if you're still with us, and
Yes.
I'm sorry about that, Kathy. Councillor White against, and Councillor Litchmark. That the report been received? Okay. I understand. It's been noted.
Received the report, but object to it being adopted.
Yeah, under B.
We get time to read the appendices.
Point is made. Right, it is passed. I move on to the next item, and that is the minutes of the Contracts Committee, 23rd of March. Councillor Quayle, are you in Section A? And we're in your hands, Barry.
Yeah, that's another one of these ones where we're just going to go into public excluded. So that's just a procedural thing. So just I move that.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Husband, any questions? There are none. I formally put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Next item on the agenda is that of pay. Any questions? Certainly lack of resources that they're crying out for there, Mr. CEO. You know, a lot of kind of pressure from central government, tight time frames. You know, we're stretched as well. And just if you read those minutes, there's a plea for help.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think that's common across many of our EV partners.
I formally put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, is carried. Risk and assurance. This is the meeting of the 9th of March, led by Councillor, well, his deputy, Councillor Quayle. It's a Section A item. Would you like to move that, Barry?
Yes, I will move that. Just to mention for council that MFE found no issues with its shovel ready in its audit, so that was pleasing. The other item that the risk and insurance, I might mention this, that we're seeking a report from the Climate Action on matters to do with that and reporting over the risks to specifically to our committee so that we can get a clear handle on that matter. So those are the key matters, I think, and they're all Section A items. Thank you.
And
So
I look back and probably dangerous saying this, but you know, former director Claire Cricket and the work that she did in this shovel ready in that short period of time to get it accurate and to get that $43 million of what was new money was certainly must be noted again. It's moved by Barry and it's seconded by Councillor McPherson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, is carried. Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, look,
page 54.
Happy to move. Obviously, the majority was in public excluded, Mr. Chairman, and just note that we've got a meeting of this appeals committee next week, which, given the time it's taken for those that are interested, there'd be a lot more updated information coming via that hui. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Story is a member, happy to second that. If there are no questions or comments, I formally put it, noting, as Councillor Kneebone said, most of it is confidential later in the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. How are we going there, Dave? This, the other item was really interesting. It's page 59. This is the Tūwhātoa Māori Trust Board. It's a meeting on the 21st of March. It's under Section A, and I move that it be for noting, and I'll call in for a seconder. Councillor McPherson, any questions? Councillor White?
Actually, just a comment, because it was mentioned in the committee that we still don't have a second person from Te Wharetoa allocated for the Lake Taupo Protection Project Joint Committee. We haven't had a second person for the whole of this term, and it has created a problem occasionally with a quorum, so we've had meetings cancelled. Can we please make this a priority, that we pursue this with Te Wharetoa? Because, you know, sometimes there are times where this meeting is cancelled and then we have to have something like an extraordinary meeting. And yeah, I just don't think it's good enough. I think we need to actually make sure we've got a second person so we don't have trouble with somebody not turning up. Thank you.
As we stated just 3 or 4 minutes ago, under the pump, because for the reasons beyond the control, what can you do about it, Chris?
I will take the councillor's suggestion, and we will continue looking at you, Neville. We'll continue to advocate for Te Wharetoa Māori Trust Board. They also have an acting chief executive in place at the moment, I think, until October. So we'll work through the acting chief executive, Rake, to see what we can do to get that position. Thanks.
Councillors, I think you're aware that we won a prestigious award in the SOGM. That's a group of CEOs that all get together to look at their salaries and conditions and so forth. I think he's tired of that, but that's what it is. It's a cartel. But it's quite seriously, it's we won, you did, this council won the award on section 33 of the kind of checking and that kind of stuff of their own lands, and outside that, it's groundbreaking, and the award is prestigious, and I have taken it upon myself to get a replica created, and that next meeting that needs to be presented to them. It's identical, and it's I think it's the right thing to do. So I so move. It's moved by Remington, seconded by McPherson. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. It was section A item for noting. The next item of that is that Councillor White.
Yes, Stu's welcome to make comments on this as well. You were actually there at that one, weren't you? I'm just trying to remember.
No.
Oh, you weren't at that one?
Page 66.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'm happy to actually move this. Yet again, it was a really good committee meeting, really good people on this committee, and always have great conversations with them. Mainly, the main things that we were talking about were the update on the development of Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, and the fact that we're at the moment sort of involved in. I mean, we just had an update on the development of that, but it's ready to go, and we've had really good feedback on it. So, yeah. Any questions?
Councillor Husband.
Yeah, I'd just like it minuted that I'm a sincere apology for this meeting, as I had COVID. So it's my #1 favourite meeting in the entire 9 years. It really is. It's the most beautiful meeting I've ever attended in my life, actually. So I really don't like missing them. So I'd like them to know that I only missed it because I had COVID. Yeah.
It's moved by Councillor White. Point is noted, Councillor Husband. Seconded by Councillor Remington. I was a non-voting member, but there through most of that meeting. Formally put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. The next one is that of the Waikato Rapatu River Trust and the governance meeting. It's dated 29th of March, page 72. Obviously, it's co-governance, section A. I so move.
Question.
I'll get a second, and then I'll ask comes to you, Fred. Second by Councillor Nicol. Question from you, Fred.
Yeah, on page 78, number 12, shovel ready. I'm just a little bit bewildered as to why within our Waikato West Coast zone there is a shortage of service providers and the need for iwi to grow in that space. When I'm aware of a local nursery there that's got 100,000 plants sitting on the weed mat looking for a home.
Sounds like Waikato going forward. Similar sort of thing over here.
I'm not sure why that there appears to be some community groups that are completely being overlooked. And it's not to say that their 27 years of service to the West Coast should be overlooked, but it is. So there is an oversupply, not an undersupply, on the West Coast, because I've had to lay staff off because there's insufficient sales of plants or work that's coming forward. Now, this is another community group, community initiative, and this council's supposed to be supporting communities. It's all through their documentation as to how they like to support community initiatives, and yet again, it's not happening. So why is that documented as a shortage?
Fred, I'm going to get that question answered now by Director Ryan, and then I'll come to Councillor Strange. Greg, good morning, kia ora.
Yeah, good morning, councillors. So I can't speak to that minute in particular. I wasn't at that meeting. What I can provide council with the assurance of is that all of our plant procurement work goes through a rigorous and transparent process in terms of putting out open tenders for our various projects, whether it be supply or planting as well. And so every nursery has the opportunity to participate in those particular processes, obviously within the bounds of the particular projects and the funding requirements.
Okay, Fred, I'll get you to flick that off. It's yours, no worries. Councillor Strange, I'm just going to hold it for a moment. Was this apropos what we're talking about now?
Yes.
The meeting will flow better if you ask your question now, if it's relation direct to that topic.
So I'm assuming, Director Ryan, in answering the question the way that you have, are you saying to Councillor Litchwark that the aspirations of this council in relation to community development are one of the weighted attributes that are factored into our procurement decision?
Often that is the case, yes. As I said, the contract procurement does vary depending on funding requirements. Often funding deeds have specific requirements around community development, but that is often a consideration in our open procurement processes.
Well, that is a weakness. If this council has a passion for community development, then every time it does procurement, considerations of the community should form one of the weighted attributes. Because if I was sitting in that chair over there, I'd be saying in response to your answer, Chair, I could be gamed, because that's what I'm hearing.
I'll get you to take that matter up with Director Ryan offline. We're all pretty aware of how the weighting, not only price, experience, local, are all weighted in percentages, and we occasionally have to fine-tune those or alter those for good reason. So I'll get you to take up with Director Ryan offline. Councillor? Yep, Councillor Strange.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was at the meeting, but only for the first half. So my question is on page 75.6. I was just wondering if somebody from the meeting could add a bit of clarity, please. Update from Waikato Tainui on potential for Waikato Tainui to be involved in Te Huia train service and contribute to the growth in the network. Just a question, was it acknowledged that Don Turner from Waikato Tainui is already a part of the working group?
I can respond. I mean, it was a little while ago, but I believe that was talked about. But I'm sorry that I don't have more in my recollection about that exact point, nor about the point that Councillor Litchwark raised. But I do think that we went off track with that bullet point for Councillor Litchwark raised into a different direction. notwithstanding, that's probably a good conversation, but it might just be worth looking back at the video for the very last points to clarify those. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Since my memory fails me.
Thank you. I was just wondering if perhaps that could be highlighted, that they already are an essential part of the working group. Yeah, thank you.
Can you note that, Dave? Angela, are you done and dusted? Okay. Councillor Nicol?
I'd already pretty much said what I'd meant to say, which was in regards to that bullet point where we went off track. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Husband?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure Councillor Kneebone and myself, who both chair the integrated catchment, will take the concerns here today, because it's been take them up with the director, because I think this has been a concern that I raised through the Piako Green Corridor as well, the social procurement. And I actually raised the point, well, we've got Fred, keeps saying he's got thousands of trees. We've got Ngāti Hawa, but instead we're going to wait for this group to grow their own trees and plant them on the Green Corridor. So, in one particular case. So, I just want to make sure that, yeah, that it's all above board and everyone. So, yeah, because it seems there are trees there, but yeah, I just want to understand that whole scenario. So I'll take it offline with the director.
Those points are noted, and by Director Ryan and by our CEO. Last but not least, is that Fred? Are you done and dusted?
Yeah,
Okay. It's moved by myself, it's seconded by Councillor Nicol. Then Section A item, that'd be for noting. It's under delegated authority. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. The item at the outset of the meeting in regard to Councillor Litzbach has been withdrawn by Councillor Hodge, and I am actually running within 2 minutes of time. So the meeting stands adjourned for a cup of tea.